We've looked at the basics of music now, melody, rhythm, and harmony, and we've looked at the basics of notation, how to write down those elements, melodies, where they're written on the staff, and how the notes are laid out on the different clefs. We've looked at different rhythms for different notes. But we haven't looked at actually interpreting how notes are written on a page. There are a series of what are called articulations that are markings that a composer puts on a piece of music to indicate to the player how to play the notes, other than just the pitch and the timing of the notes. There's different ways and nuances of playing the notes, and I want to go through some of the common articulation markings in this video that indicate how a note should be played rather than just when and where it be played. And I also want to look at other common forms of instruction that are indicated in scores and sheet music that indicate to a performer certain navigation instructions about where to play and where to jump back to and where to skip to and things like that. Let's start at the beginning. The first symbol we have here is called ottava alta, and a lot of these are Italian or derived from Italian when they were originally used. So ottava alto, this indicates that you need to play the notes under this sign one octave higher than written. This is useful when you're writing for instruments in extreme ranges. You can write them where they're easier to read on the staff and then indicate the octave with that. This is actually a bad example. This is actually a way not to use it. And here, related to that, we have ottava bassa, and this indicates to play the note underneath the sign one octave lower than written. So, similar kind of thing, but in reverse. And we have other markings called quindicesima alta and quindicesima bassa, which indicate 2 octaves lower and 2 octaves higher. I'm not going to show you those now, but they have a 15. They look like these, but they have 15 instead of 8 over there. Next, we have what are called dynamic markings, and they indicate to a player how loud or how quietly to play certain notes. The first one is mezzo piano, and it means play it moderately quietly. And then we get gradually quieter and quieter. This symbol is called piano, and that indicates to play it quietly. This is called pianissimo, and that means to play it very quietly. When you add one more P, it's called pianissimo, or pianissimo possible, and it means to play it extremely quietly. And each time you add an extra P on, you play it even more quietly, and you add an extra IS into the name, so that would be pianissimo, with 4 Ps. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have getting louder. That's called mezzo forte, and it means to play it moderately loud. Forte, play it loudly. Fortissimo, play it very loudly. And then add on extra Fs to play it even more loudly. We have fortissimo, fortissimo, depending how many Fs you add on. The next marking is called sforzando, and this is found a lot, and it means a forceful, sudden accent on a note. And related to this, we have this symbol here, which is forte piano, and it's similar. It means a forte followed immediately by piano, so you hit that note loudly and then quietly right after. All of these are static dynamic markings. They tell the player, okay, when you reach this point in the music, play at this volume. Here we have gradual increases and decreases in volume. This indicates passages of volume dynamics over time. Now this is a decrescendo and this is a crescendo. Now crescendo indicates to the player to gradually increase in volume from the beginning to the end of the marking. And you'd often have dynamic markings at the beginning. So you might have mezzo piano there and then forte there, meaning to go from a mezzo piano all the way to a forte. And this is a decrescendo. It works in reverse. You start from a louder dynamic and get gradually quieter over time. And this is also sometimes referred to as a diminuendo instead of decrescendo. Next kind of markings we have here are accents, and this requires that a note stands out more than the unaccented notes around it. So you play a little more forcefully, these little sideways triangles on them, and this is another way of notating accents, little hats on top. The next markings I want to look at are also derived from Italian, staccato and legato. Now staccato markings are indicated by these little dots, and they can be either below the notes or above the notes. And when you see these staccato markings, notes are interpreted as slightly shorter than notated, with lots of space between them. So for example, if there were dots under all these notes, it would be phrased like this, da 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 da, each one a little bit shorter. Now opposite to that, we have the legato marking, and it's the opposite because notes are connected with no space between them, and that's indicated with this long line underneath the notes. So if this was all legato, it would be da 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 instead of da 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 da. So different articulations to indicate to the performer how to interpret the notes. Next thing I want to look at are slurs, and that's this over here. So we see a curved line joining two or more notes. Now when you see this, only the first note under the marking has a definite articulation at the beginning, and the rest are seamlessly connected so that there's no break between the notes. So it's a phrasing thing. It means play this as one phrase and consider that as you're interpreting the notes so that the real articulation is on the first note and the other ones are just related to that in one longer phrase. Now, it's important not to confuse these with ties. You'll remember we looked at ties when two notes of the same pitch are joined with these markings. It means to hold the duration of the note. But when these are used on notes of different pitches like this, it's a phrasing marking telling you how to articulate the notes underneath them. Next, we have portamento, and that's indicated by these lines. And that's a smooth glide between the two notes, including all the pitches in between. So it's like a glissando. And this works well on stringed instruments where you can really connect all the notes seamlessly, like a guitar or a violin. Next, we have a marking that's called marcato, another Italian-derived name. And this denotes that it should be played heavily, accented with force. It's similar to an accent, but it even looks the same, but it's a little bit more heavy than an accent. Moving right along, we have a double bar line here. We haven't looked at this before. These are navigation markings we're going to get into now. When you see two lines like that, it indicates that it's the end of a section of a piece of music. Let's scroll down and continue here. And we have here an open repeat sign. This looks like a double bar line with a thicker line and a thinner line, and then two dots in front of it. And this marks the beginning of a passage of music that's going to be repeated. And then we have a closed repeat sign at the end here, which is the opposite. It's a thicker line on the outside with a thinner one on the inside and two dots. And this marks the end of the passage that's to be repeated. So if the performer was reading this, he'd see, okay, we're at the end of a section here. We're getting to a new section here. I play it till there, and then I jump back there and repeat it again. Now, further navigation marking is this over here, and this is called a first ending. Now, this section is played the first time the passage is repeated. So you play that through, and you play that, you jump there and repeat it again, and then when you're playing this through the second time, you skip that and you jump to what's called the second ending. So this part is played the second time the passage is repeated. The first ending is skipped. So it's a way of saving space on paper. Instead of having multi-pages of score, you can abbreviate things like this when these bars are to be repeated, except there's a little bit of a change the first and second time. So first endings and second endings. The next articulation marking is this, and it's a little sort of half moon with a dot underneath it. And this is called a fermata. This is also referred to as a pause or a hold, and it means that the note should be sustained longer than the actual note value indicated. Now, the length of time that it needs to be sustained depends on either the conductor or the performer. If you have someone conducting you in front of the orchestra, when you see a marking like that, you hold the note and then you look up at the conductor for an indication of when to continue. And if you're a solo performer, you use your discretion and you pause in the music and hold that note longer. It's normally at the end of a phrase, and then start with the next note when it feels right. The next thing we have is a repeat sign. You see a diagonal slash like that with two dots, and that indicates to the performer to repeat the previous bar. So just a repeat sign to repeat what's before. The next thing that you often see in music is a multi-bar rest. And this indicates a number of consecutive bars with no notes in it to play. So here we have a 4 written on top. So instead of indicating 4 separate bars with whole note rests in them, we just indicate this long, thick slash with a 4, indicating that there's 4 bars of silence. And then we have a double repeat sign over here, and this is a diagonal slash or double diagonal slash with dots placed across 2 bars, and this means to repeat the previous 2 bars. So whereas this indicates to repeat the previous bar, this indicates to repeat the previous 2 bars. And then finally, at the end of a piece of music, you usually find a double bar line like this. And it's different than this double bar. These are 2 thin lines, but when you have one thick one and one thin one, that indicates the end of the complete piece of music. So there's some basic articulation and navigation markings. There are a lot more, but these are the basics. And they'll help you when you're writing out parts for musicians to play or reading parts. That's it. Thanks for hanging in. I'll see you in the next video.